a couple of people who closed their accounts because of abuse, though in both cases that I know of, they came back. Manish Tiwari and Justice Karju.
And Omar himself had actually started a blog and then closed it down because he said that the abuse, the anti-Muslim abuse, was too much to take. So, I mean, back to the question:
but he's still on Twitter and he's doing very well.
I know.
You know, part of the problem with this abuse thing is the nature of the internet, which is that the anonymity the internet provides means that people say things to you they would never say to your face. You know, you are just some anonymous, not anonymous, but some distant figure. Your own name is known out there, and the anonymous critic loses nothing by hurling vile abuse at you because no one knows who they are, and it's too much of a hassle to find out. And it gives them momentary gratification to know they've said offensive, you know, often four-letter words and all that stuff. I just think that, you know, why let these, the small percentage, I would say, in my experience, and not more than 1 or 2% of those whose tweets I receive would be like that. So why let those 1 or 2% drive away the useful interaction with the other 98%?
All right. Priyanka Raj has a question.
पर आज आम इंसान जो है सो राजनीति से बहुत दूर होता जा रहा है. जैसा कि आप देख रहे हैं कि चुनाव लड़ने के लिए ज़्यादा पैसों की ज़रूरत पड़ती है. राजनीति में परिवारवाद की परंपरा भी बढ़ रही है सर. तो सर इसके लिए कौन जिम्मेदार है और ऐसा क्या करना चाहिए कि ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा आम इंसान और युवा जो कि आजकल चाहते नहीं राजनीति से जुड़ें?
हम ही जिम्मेदार हैं. बात यह है कि ये नई बात नहीं है. बहुत साल से ऐसे हैं. जब मैं भी विद्यार्थी था, जब मैं पढ़ाई कर रहा था, अगर मैंने कहा था कि मैं राजनीति में जाना चाहता हूँ, मेरे माँ बाप तो मुझे पिटाई देते होंगे शायद, क्योंकि हमारे ये जो मिडिल क्लास परिवारों में ये विश्वास है कि अगर आप पढ़ाई कर सकेंगे, परीक्षा लिख सकेंगे तो आप यही कीजिए, और अगर आप ये सब नहीं कर सकेंगे तब तो आप राजनीति में जाइए. ये है हमारे मिडिल क्लास मेंटालिटी. लेकिन प्रॉब्लम ये है कि अगर हम सब ये राजनीति की फील्ड दूसरों को छोड़ दें, then we will get a politics that does not reflect us, that does not represent us. राजनीतिक जो लोग जो है हमारी प्रतिनिधि होने चाहिए ना, तो सारे इंडिया के जैसे लोग होना चाहिए. कोई गरीब आदमी के लिए भी प्रतिनिधि चाहिए, कोई गांव वाला का भी प्रतिनिधि चाहिए, और आपके जैसे लोग जो पढ़े लिखे लोग हैं, जो नगर में रहते हैं, जो युवक हैं, आपके लिए भी प्रतिनिधि चाहिए. लेकिन कौन होंगे आपके प्रतिनिधि? अगर आपके जैसे लोग इसमें इन्वॉल्व नहीं होना चाहते हैं तो नेचुरली दूसरों आएंगे, एंड यू विल हैव लीडर्स यू आर नॉट प्राउड ऑफ और इवन अशेम्ड ऑफ.
तो हम कर क्या सकते हैं?
इन्वॉल्व हो जाइए. जैसे आप मुझसे पूछ रहे हैं आज, आप पॉलिटिकल मीटिंग्स में जाइए, आप आपके लोकल, आपके जो सिंपथीज़ हैं, जिसी भी पार्टी से सिंपथी है, उनके लोकल ऑफिस कहाँ है पता कर लीजिए, उनका ब्रांच वहाँ का आपके इलाके में जो कोई है उनसे बात कर लीजिए, बोलिए कि मैं इन्वॉल्व होना चाहता हूँ, मैं क्या करूँ, आपकी अगली मीटिंग कब है, मैं सिर्फ पोस्टर स्टिक करने के लिए नहीं आया हूँ, मैं एंगेज होना चाहता हूँ, बताइए क्या करूँ. गेट इन्वॉल्व. मेरे ख्याल में ऐसे ही, you know, if we can take on upon ourselves the responsibility, the zimmedari of actually doing something, then and then if we don't like it or we pull out, then we can say fine. But too many of our people, particularly our educated middle class people, keep away and then blame the rest. So we have a responsibility for abdicating our own responsibility.
आम आदमी के पास उतनी पहुंच नहीं होती है, पैसे नहीं होते हैं, वो इन सब के फेर में पड़ना नहीं चाहता है, जैसे क्योंकि उसके पास टाइम नहीं होता है कि वो अपने रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में.
अगर टाइम नहीं होता तो टाइम बनाना चाहिए ना.
पैसे की भी
पैसे की बात तो अलग है.
सवाल पूछा कि परिवार व्हाट्स द वर्ड, परिवारवाद. अब ये आपके लिए शायद थोड़ा मुश्किल सवाल है.
मेरे परिवार में कोई नहीं है जो राजनीति किया. ना मेरा माँ बाप राजनीति के, ना मेरे बच्चे करना चाहते हैं, बच्चे करने चाहते हैं.
हर राजनीतिक दल में परिवारवाद है, लेकिन शुरुआत शायद आपकी ही पार्टी से हुई है, तो आप इसके बारे में क्या कह सकते हैं?
नहीं, शुरुआत तो कहाँ से हुई है,
युवा वर्ग से आप क्या कहेंगे?
लेकिन बहुत लीडर्स, क्योंकि हमारे कल्चर ऐसे ही अनफॉर्चुनेटली. अगर आप मोची बनना चाहते हैं या कारपेंटर बनना चाहते हैं तो माँ बाप मोची या कारपेंटर होना चाहिए, लेकिन कोई और ने आपको सिखाने के लिए ये काम. हमारी सोसाइटी में knowledge is transmitted through the gene pool. That has been our culture. That's why the sons of actors are actors, the sons of politicians are politicians. मैं क्या बोलूँ? But we can also move beyond that culture. There are people like me who have no political background, no political connections, who've come into politics, and I hope that there will be more. I mean, it's not easy, I agree. there was a study that said that every Indian MP below the age of 35 is the son or daughter of a politician. And I think something like only 1 or 2 MPs below the age of 45 are not. So it is tough. But if we steer away from things because they're tough, then how would we accomplish anything in life? You say we don't have the time. We have to make the time. Always something comes at the expense of something else. I used to write when I had a very full-time job, kids to bring up, a marriage to maintain, family, home. So I did it at the expense of other things. I denied myself entertainment or going to the movies or watching television or whatever, but I wrote. It was important to me to do that. If politics is important, you will do it at the expense of something else you might otherwise do. Make the time. Money is a different issue, I agree. I mean, most ordinary people, and I come from a middle-class family myself, a professional family, we don't have disposable income for politics. But the thing is, political parties do. They get contributions. If you involve yourself with a party, whichever party you want, they will, if they see your talent and they see your commitment, they will have to help find the funding for you to go ahead with your work. Not everybody is going to start right off in politics and have to spend a few crores getting elected. That's not the idea. Come into politics at the grassroots. You're young enough to do so at the bottom level and climb up.
Just moving away from domestic politics, how on earth do you speak so many languages so well?
I don't know if I do speak all those languages well.
You're not bad at Hindi, I must say.
My Hindi is rather weak, as you all heard. But the thing is that I have a decent ear, a fairly good ear. I just haven't had the time, see, time again becomes an issue, to do justice to it. I think if I had given myself more time, I would speak a lot more languages. My French is pretty good, but it would have been very easy to pick up Spanish. I just didn't have the time to go to enroll in the classes for Spanish that I could have at the United Nations, so I never learned it. Similarly, as a small child, we had Tamil speaking domestic help. My Tamil used to be fluent. It's all gone now. I can just say barely a few phrases. The thing is, I can speak a few sentences in many languages and look as if I know the language, but in fact, I'm not all that good at it.
So, well, in any case, we'll talk about Malayalam. We'll talk
Malayalam,
about
of course,
language.
I have to get elected in Malayalam. So
we'll talk about language and politics, a lot more of that, but coming up after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're still talking to Dr. Shashi Tharoor at the Indian Institute of Mass Communication. Before the break, we were talking about your affinity for languages. I was just wondering though, sir, എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഇത്രയും ഭാഷകൾ ഇത്രയും ശരിയായിട്ട് പറയുന്നത്? മലയാളം സാറ് മലയാളം പറയുന്നത് പോലും ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് കൂടുതൽ ഉപയോഗിക്കാതെയാണല്ലോ.
ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് ഉപയോഗിക്കാതിരിക്കാൻ ശ്രമിക്കും, പക്ഷേ എൻ്റെ മലയാളം ഞാൻ കേട്ട് പഠിച്ച മലയാളമാണ്. ഞാൻ ജനിച്ചത് ലണ്ടനിലും വളർന്നത് ബോംബെയിലും കൽക്കട്ടയിലും ഡൽഹിയിലുമായിരുന്നു. അത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് വിദേശത്ത് പോയി താമസിച്ചു. അപ്പോൾ നാട്ടിൽ വെക്കേഷന് വേണ്ടി മാത്രം വന്നുകൊണ്ടു വെക്കേഷൻ അവധിക്ക് വേണ്ടി മാത്രം വന്നിട്ടായിരുന്നു. അതുകൊണ്ട് എനിക്ക് അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഞാൻ എപ്പോഴും പറയും ഐ എം കേരള സോൾ സർവൈവിങ് ഇല്ലിറ്ററേറ്റ്. എഴുതാനും വായിക്കാനും ആരും പഠിപ്പിച്ചു തന്നിട്ടില്ല, മലയാളത്തിൽ സ്കൂളിൽ പഠിച്ചിട്ടില്ല. പക്ഷേ കേട്ടിട്ട് സംസാരിക്കാൻ ഒരു പഴക്കമുണ്ട്. ഇപ്പോൾ രാഷ്ട്രീയത്തിൽ എന്തായാലും പ്രസംഗം ചെയ്യണമല്ലോ. എനിക്ക് രാഷ്ട്രീയ പ്രഭാഷണം വലിയ സാഹിത്യ മലയാളത്തിലൊന്നും പറയാൻ സാധിക്കില്ല, പക്ഷേ സാധാരണ കോൺവെർസേഷൻ ചെയ്യാൻ ഒരു ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടില്ല.
Okay, for those of you who didn't understand, I was asking, how is it you speak so many languages so well? And especially, I've seen Dr. Tharoor speaking Malayalam without using any English words. Do you want to translate your response?
No, I just said that I try and avoid using English words, but the fact is that I actually never learned Malayalam. I never lived in Malayalam. I was born in London, brought up in Bombay, Calcutta and Delhi, went and lived and worked abroad after that. So I've only been to Kerala for holidays. So I used the word vacation and quickly corrected it in Malayalam. On leave. So the fact is that my Malayalam is a picked up Malayalam, and I'm illiterate in Malayalam. I can't read and write, and that's very unusual in Kerala where everybody's literate. So, but because I heard the language being spoken, I was able to pick it up. And of course, as a politician, I have to make speeches in Malayalam all the time. I don't do so in very fancy literary Malayalam, but I do it in conversational Malayalam, and it seems to be effective enough.
Well, finally, a question about your ministry. Namesh Nath Dham has a question for you.
Sir, it pertains to the Ministry of HRD. In the recent past, there have been many surveys conducted and studies which have highlighted the startling facts that students of class 5, even especially the government students, can't read the text of class 2. So it casts a bad aspersion on government schools in India. So particularly, what is HRD Ministry doing in this light and to improve the situation on ground?
We've seen those studies. Those are done by a very respected non-governmental organization called Pratham, and these studies are important, but it's sort of like putting a dipstick into a tank and seeing the measurement at that time. We have a much more detailed, thoroughgoing, broader study by the NCERT, the National Council for Education, Research and Training, which actually over a period of time does systematic studies of class 3, class 5, class 8, and they publish their reports. Unfortunately, much slower than an NGO can. Pratham will give you figures for last year already. This year, NCERT will give you figures from 3 years ago, and this is a bit of a problem. But I'm afraid the findings of the very detailed governmental survey actually are somewhat at variance with what the Pratham study has shown, in that the NCERT survey suggests there has been some improvement in languages and mathematics, in general academic performance in all 3 levels over the years studied. So they did a 2003/4 study, then they did a 2006/7 study, or sorry, a 5/6 and then a 7/8, and those figures have all shown an improvement. But the overall levels of attainment are low. So the improvement is from, let's say, 46% competence to 48% competence. That's still pretty bad. We'd like to see 70% competence. So I'm not saying that the government schools are achieving a great deal, but they're at least achieving some progress. Then as far as the actions of the government are concerned, the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan is pumping money into state governments for everything, including giving teachers more training, in-service training, 20 days for every teacher, to make sure they're better equipped to be able to deal with these things. Trying to give them additional and more sophisticated and useful teaching materials developed by the central government. Trying to give support for the institutions and for the kids. In all these ways, we are trying to have remedial measures that will improve educational outcomes. As I said, I can't pretend that things are going well, but they may not be as bad as the newspaper reports based on one study would suggest.
Debalina Day has a question.
Hello, sir. So it's a fact that majority of the students in India, they depend heavily on private coaching centers, and this trend has assumed such an alarming proportion that a major chunk of the income of every family is spent on paying tuition fees, and many people blame the consistently declining standards of school education for the sharp rise of private coaching centers. So what's your take on this?
No, this is worrying, and at the same time you can't do anything about it, in the sense that and everyone is free to take additional tuition if they want to. But it obviously is a shame if it becomes a substitute for adequate schooling. We should have proper schooling. I'm very much opposed to the rampant commercialization of education, and in some cases it's also against the law. We actually have a bill coming up that will codify this, called the Unfair Practices Prevention and Punishment Bill, which will, for example, outlaw capitation fees on admission, donations to get ahead, universities that publish one set of fees on the website but charge something else when the parents actually come. All of these wrong practices which are happening in our educational system. And we want to ensure, through the Right to Education Act, that money doesn't become a factor in people's education at the school levels. And at the university level, we want to have regulations, we want to have affiliations, we want to have accreditations, so that we actually have a system in which quality prevails over commercial considerations. We're not there yet, but we are making determined steps in that direction. And certainly one of the things that will help is if Parliament will stop getting disrupted and they will actually debate and discuss and vote bills, we'll get more of these pending bills through Parliament that way.
But Dr. Tharoor, I mean, of course, the bill sounds great, but if you scrap capitation fees, won't that make you rather unpopular in your home state?
No, and the fact is that, you can't afford to have universities using education as a means of exploiting people. As an MP, I get so many sob story cases of kids or their families who've taken out ridiculously large loans just to get admission into a frankly substandard private institution, and who are then desperate and they come to the MP, say, can you please get the bank to extend our repayment period or waive the loan, or all of these things. There's so many people suffering, and it's a great shame. Of course, the government has come into the educational loan space. We are giving loans. I would like to see the interest rates on government supported loans coming down. We are giving student loans. We're also trying to give more scholarships, particularly to children from families below the poverty line. We're trying all of this. But as the young lady suggested, there's a lot of commercialization of this whole process. People saying private tuitions, private coaching, various other kinds of private inducements will be what gets them ahead in life. And that's wrong, and that's a great shame. I mean, I'm lucky in the sense that at no stage of my schooling or college did my parents ever have to do anything more than pay the prescribed fees. I'd like every child to have the same advantage that my parents and I had.
Subhash Verma?
सर 1978 से ही आप यूनाइटेड नेशन से जुड़े हुए हैं सर, और 2009 में आके लगभग 30 साल बाद आके पॉलिटिक्स ज्वाइन किए सर। क्या सर इसके पीछे कोई ऐसा कुछ कारण रहा हो, या क्यों इस तरफ मूव हुए आप?
देखिए, जब मैं विदेश में रहता था मैं फिर भी भारत के बारे में बहुत सोचता था। आपको पता है कि मैं 13 किताब लिखा हूँ, वो 13वां अभी आया, लेकिन पहले 12 किताब तो मैं विदेश में रहता था। फिर भी मैं भारत के बारे में सोच के मेरे आइडियाज़ भारत के बारे में, मैं तो इतिहास पढ़ा था यूनिवर्सिटी में, तो ऐतिहासिक ज्ञान जो मेरा था वो इंडिया के बारे में, वो तो मैं नॉवेल्स में भी इस्तेमाल किया और मेरे नॉन फिक्शन में भी। और इंडिया के जो पूरे सोशल, इकोनॉमिक, पॉलिटिकल डेवलपमेंट हमारे स्वतंत्र मिलने के बाद मैंने 2 किताबें में लिखा है। एक तो इंडिया फ्रॉम मिडनाइट टू द मिलेनियम, हमारे पहले 50 साल के इतिहास के बारे में, और दूसरे ये द एलिफेंट, द टाइगर एंड द सेल फोन, हमारे कंटेम्प्रेरी ट्रांसफॉर्मेशंस के बारे में। तो जब आप किसी चीज़ के ऊपर बहुत सोचते हैं, बहुत लिखते हैं, उसके ऊपर भाषण भी देने पड़ते हैं इधर उधर, तो आपको कभी कभी लगता है कि हम इसके अंदर क्यों नहीं घुसते, हम भी क्यों नहीं कोशिश करें। और मुझे भी ये अनुभव हुआ कि मैं जब ऑडियंसेस के सामने ऐसे बात कर रहे थे इस विषय के ऊपर, लोग मुझसे पूछते थे, जैसे आप पूछ रहे हैं कि आप पॉलिटिक्स में क्यों नहीं आ रहे हैं। तो मैंने कहा मैं कौन हूँ, मेरी तो कोई ये परिवारवाद तो ये नहीं, मेरे कोई बैकग्राउंड नहीं है इसमें, कौन मुझे टिकट देगा, कौन मुझे वोट देगा। लेकिन मुझे ऐसे भी लगा कि मैं कुछ लोगों को जानता हूँ मेरे UN हेड की वजह से, तो क्यों नहीं देख लें कि अगर मौका मिले। और मेरा भाग्य ये था कि मुझे ये मौका मिला, और मैंने एक सेकंड भी हेजिटेशन नहीं किया। मैंने कहा कि ये मैं कोशिश करूँगा। लेकिन मुझे कोई आइडिया नहीं था कितना कठिन है एक इलेक्शन लड़ना। अगर मैं पहले जानता तो शायद मैं इलेक्शन में लड़ने की हिम्मत नहीं होती। लेकिन बात यह है कि टिकट मिलने के बाद मुझे पता चला कि ये दिन में 18 घंटे की बात नहीं, 18 घंटा तो काम कर चुका था मैंने पीस कीपिंग में यूनाइटेड नेशंस में। लेकिन राजनीति में कभी कभी 20, 22, 23 घंटे का काम करना पड़ता है। 1 घंटे रात को सो के फिर उठ के कैंपेन पे जाना पड़ता है। तो ये बहुत कठिन काम है। लेकिन मुझे अच्छा लगा कि लोग मेरे अपील को मान के मुझे एक अच्छा 1 लाख का वोट का विजय दिया मुझे।
You were dubbed as an outsider, when you came in, and also, I mean, you weren't born and brought up in Kerala. What were the cultural issues that you had when you came in, and were there people who you faced who thought, who is this Johnny come lately who's coming in from the US to tell us what he can do for us?
Especially veteran politicians.
Especially
because
veteran
by
politicians.
my age, and I was already, 53 when I became a political candidate. Everyone of my age in Kerala politics had been a politician for over 35 years, because they all started with the Kerala Students' Union or their equivalents in the other parties, the communist parties and so on. And so they had been doing it for their lifetime. And they felt they had sweated out for 35 years while I was, in their view, sitting in air-conditioned offices of the UN. My life was not only air-conditioned offices, but doesn't matter. And so their feeling was, who is he? Exactly this. How can he presume? As one person said to a friend,